The UCC is the topic on the table for this last substantive video out of the Law of Contracts. One of the things that makes this subject so complicated is the fact that we're responsible for two entirely separate bodies of law, the common law and the UCC. The big difference, as we've already seen, is that contracts under the UCC, particularly those between merchants, are a lot easier to form than they are under the common law. UCC contracts are easier to form, they're easier to breach, and the preferred remedy under the UCC is damages. In order for specific performance to be available, there's got to be specific facts that justify it. Under the common law, we see that specific performance is the preferred remedy for real estate contracts and for contracts involving unique chattels. Since the UCC is dealing with fungible goods, damages typically are a satisfactory remedy. And also it's here under the UCC that the idea of an economic breach of contract, a breach which results in everybody being better off than they would be otherwise, well, that's a topic that's foreign to the common law of contracts. So as we consider our approach to the UCC, we'll see it mirrors our approach to the rest of the law of contracts. We deal with formation, defenses to formation, breach, defenses to breach, remedies, and defenses to remedies. Analytically, the framework is the same, but the devil's in the details, and under the common law, those details are a little different than they are under the UCC. So the first topic that we focus on here under the UCC is contract formation, and we acknowledge up front UCC contracts are easier to enter into than our common law contracts. Remember that a merchant's firm offer is irrevocable, and it doesn't require consideration. If a merchant makes a firm offer to another merchant, the mere fact that the offer has been made makes it unrevocable, and it is not, consideration is not required for it. Remember also that when merchants are negotiating, a reply to an offer that has different terms in it can still be a valid acceptance. The mirror image rule is a product of the common law, not a product of the UCC. Under the UCC, an acceptance that proposes new terms will actually be a binding acceptance, and the new terms will be binding on the original offeror unless that original offeror objects in writing. And so the idea of contract formation, as we see, is quite a bit more loose. Now, the merchant's firm offer rule is fairly heavily tested. This is some material that you'll definitely encounter in practice. We've already seen that a merchant's firm offer does not require consideration. We've also seen that a merchant's firm offer can't be revocable, but it has to be in writing, and the period of irrevocability can only be 3 months or less. A merchant's firm offer cannot extend farther into the future than that. Also, if a merchant's firm offer has a specific term, as far as how long that offer will be open, that specific term will be binding on the offeree. So if the offeror wants to make a merchant's firm offer of a specific duration, that merchant can do so, so long as that term is not longer than 3 months. Also, we see increasingly there is some attention being paid to auctions. Now, anybody who's got some experience with eBay knows all they need to know about auctions in order to do reasonably well on the multi-state bar exam and on most essay questions. Remember that with a no reserve auction, the seller will accept whatever price the market comes up with. When there is a reserve price in an auction, although we can have a continuing series of bids, if the final bid doesn't go above that level, there's no contract, and the offeror can withdraw the item that has been for sale. Also, turning to defenses to formation. Here, unconscionability is very rarely tested. It does come up, and there have been cases where a deal between merchants of differing levels of bargaining power has resulted in one merchant basically imposing terms on the other to such a degree that we can agree there's no real bargain for consideration. But the much more commonly tested issue with regard to defenses to formation is the statute of frauds. But remember, here in the UCC, contracts are easier to enter into than they are under the common law. And so the rules with regard to the statute of frauds are a little bit different, and I think you'll see they're significantly more loose than they are under the common law. If we have a pair of merchants engaging in commercial transactions, if one party sends a memorandum to the other party that is good enough to bind the sender, the other party is going to be bound to that deal as well, unless there's some opposition, some rejection within 10 days. Also, the only thing we need in order to have a contract as far as the actual terms go are the party, the subject matter, and a signature. We really only need the quantity and the item. We don't even really need the price. We can figure out the price later. But since we're dealing with merchants, all we need, the parties and the subject matter, meaning the quantity of items. That's good enough. Next, we consider modification. This is an issue that we touched on earlier in this series of substantive lectures, and I don't have anything new to add to the issue now. Remember that under the UCC, contracts can readily be modified, but a writing has to be present. Without a writing, a UCC contract can't be modified. But remember that consideration is not required to modify a UCC contract, but it is required to modify a common law contract. This is a distinction that's commonly tested. You'll definitely encounter it in your practice, and it is important enough that even in a highly abbreviated series of lectures like this one, I think it's worth mentioning. Remember also that UCC contracts can be assigned even if there's express language in the contract that forbids it. That's a little bit counterintuitive, and thus it is readily tested on the multi-state bar examination. Now, there's really a laundry list of issues presented in the little capsule outline that accompanies this part of our presentation. I don't intend to pause and discuss each of them separately. Much of this material is not very heavily tested, and much of it also lines up directly with the common law material. So, with regard to issues like the parole evidence rule and the details with regard to performance, I think those are things that you are more likely to pick up in a much more practical way through practice. But I do want to stop for a moment on the issue of warranties. Warranties under the UCC. This is the area where the law of contracts brushes up against products liability from torts. Remember products liability? It isn't really a theory of liability. It's an umbrella under which sit the theories of strict liability, negligence, and breach of warranty. Well, the warranty part of that umbrella really arises out of the law of contracts. And so remember that there are the warranties that we learn when we study torts, the warranty of merchantability and the warranty of fitness for a particular use. But also remember that under the UCC, there's also a warranty of title and a warranty against infringement. So if we are a seller under the UCC and we are selling, for example, designer bags, Gucci bags, we're warranting that we have the right to sell them and that they are in fact real, that they are not pirated or bootleg goods. And if we put bootleg goods into the supply chain or any other goods that we don't have the authority to sell, that's a breach of warranty under the UCC, and it entitles the buyer to get his or her money back. That's basically it. It's a detail that is not really heavily tested, but it's an interesting enough and a common enough detail that I thought it would be appropriate to mention it. Also realize, with regard to breach of contract, that a seller under the UCC or a buyer has got a reasonable time to cure. We are a lot faster and looser with each aspect of a transaction under the UCC than we are under the common law. Under the UCC, we have plenty of issues where the seller sends goods that don't conform to the buyer's order. And you know the buyer has the right to accept these goods, to reject them, etc. You'll see that the issues here are tested in a really ritualistic fashion. It doesn't get terribly complicated, but you'll learn it a lot better through practice than you will through study. Go out and do some questions and you'll learn whatever law you don't know on this particular point. With regard to remedies, again, The preferred remedy under the UCC is damages. And the damages issues in contracts can get quite complicated, and you'll see that when we do a few hypotheticals that touch on the topic. But the basic idea under the UCC is damages are the preferred remedy. Goods are fungible. We're all merchants here. We can make and break deals. We can cover. We can do all of the other things regarding money that makes it possible for us to just tote up the balance sheet and allocate damages accordingly. Specific performance is a lot less common under the UCC than it is under the common law, and the key facts that will give rise to a potential equitable specific performance remedy under the UCC are those that deal with fungible goods that for one reason or another are a lot more unique than they would be otherwise. That wraps up a consideration of special sales issues, and it concludes our series on the substantive law of contracts. Next, we're going to consider a series of hypotheticals that will flesh out your knowledge and that will help you apply the analytical tools that will help ensure that your consideration of contracts issues is both complete and well organized.